everyone, this is our Managing Change presentation, and our topic is specifically on DEI challenges in hiring practices. My name is Jackie Johnson, and I'm also presenting with Taylor and Zach. Our goals for today are to use organizational and leadership theory examples to showcase a foundation for how to advocate for change at an institution of higher education. Secondarily, we are going to discuss the potential use for and challenges of theory as it relates to institutional change. So to give you a little bit of institutional context, we're looking at UW-Madison, which is a large public flagship land-grant university and is part of the University of Wisconsin, or UW system. It's partially funded by the state legislature, and has significant financial resources, including an endowment and a very large budget. The spring enrollment was approximately just shy of 50,000 students, and you can see the breakdown here of enrollment, with the enrollment being predominantly white students. So the background of our issues is that in fall of 2023, the legislature sought to make cuts to DEI efforts in the state. There was a compromise that was made between the UW System Board of Regents and the legislature. Ultimately, that compromise had decided on freezing DEI staffing, restructuring of nearly 50 DEI positions, and end UW-Madison hiring initiative of more diverse faculty. UW-Madison, of course, was impacted along with the other UW system schools, and that posed the challenge of having the schools try to balance between implementing changes while also continuing to support DEI. So then, considering these barriers from the compromise, our question is, how can UW-Madison still increase the number of diverse qualified candidates in staff and faculty positions? So looking at organizational theory on how we could approach proposing this at the institution, right? So UW-Madison can be viewed as operating from an organized anarchy organizational theory due to its sheer size and number of individual units that are on campus. These units themselves understand the different roles that they play at the institution, all working together maybe for a common goal, of course, as UW-Madison would be. We recognize that there is strength in many goals in individual units and the flexibility in reaching these goals. And we also have communication coming from many different sources and directions all at once. And UW-Madison can also be viewed as having a bureaucratic organizational theory due to the hierarchical structures and reporting structures that exist. This can also be seen through rational top-down decision-making that happens from chancellor all the way down, or board of regents and all the way down. There is a resilience and reliance on standard operating procedures and best practices. So then, thinking about how UW-Madison has components of organized anarchy and bureaucratic organizational theories, we can begin to answer that question that we proposed earlier, which was considering the barriers of the compromise. How can UW-Madison approach increasing the number of diverse qualified candidates in staff and faculty positions? So what we could do from leadership theory perspectives, use the concept of organized anarchy, for instance, to propose ideas that can permeate all different units that work differently, uniquely, in their own right. And we can present statistics that are rational and that relate to others, that they can see, relate to, and make sense to them, right, from a bureaucratic leadership position. We could also discuss examples of practices that have not worked, that might resonate with different units across campus, and propose new ones that fall within the scope of the new direction that the institution wants to take, which then can also resonate with using different ideas can resonate then across different units on campus, kind of relating to the path goal leadership theory. We can also discuss the purpose of why we are wanting to still increase the number of diverse qualified candidates despite the legislature issues that we're having, and discuss how everybody can contribute differently to the goal that we have as an institution, and how they can contribute individually as a unit and a person, and find their reasoning behind, encourage them to find their reason, their purpose behind the getting behind the goal of hiring more qualified candidates that are diverse, and ultimately discuss how it relates to the goal and solicit buy-in from and promote belonging across the stakeholders that we have in all the different units across campus, which touches on path goal and leader-member exchange theory. Connecting back up to bureaucratic organizational theory, we can use the hierarchical approach of top-down requirements at an institutional level that all units have to follow, right? So then we could outline policy that units must follow when conducting their search processes. Touching on bureaucratic leadership again, require trainings that hiring managers should take to be more educated in DEI and the search process and why it matters. Touching again on bureaucratic leadership. So now we're going to put that all together, taking that theory and putting it with context of the issue that we're looking at, that Zach and Taylor will go into further.
Before we lay out our approach, we first need to acknowledge some of the underlying challenges that exist in DEI hiring practices. While the acknowledgement of these challenges does not address them, it helps to draw awareness to some of the underlying barriers that stand in the way of staff and faculty diversity. These include the pipeline challenge. This challenge helps to highlight how, despite an increasingly diverse racial and ethnic student population where women are now the majority of students, overall research indicates that faculty and staff ranks remain homogeneous. This can be seen in the fact that over 70% of faculty are white, with nearly identical breakdown between male and female identifying employees. At the same time, only 13% of faculty are Asian and only 7% are Black. Overall, this data is not identical regarding university staff, however, it is similar to that of faculty. Another challenge that exists is outdated faculty recruitment. Many institutions do not even have a faculty diversity strategy in place, and for so many of the institutions that do, this strategy is not necessarily clearly articulated. Procedures such as requiring search committee training and developing targeted efforts to build personal relationships with diverse candidates are often not clear or lacking. Another challenge are the myths that exist regarding diversity, faculty, and staff. A common perception is that faculty and staff of color do not want to come to a particular campus or region of the country because it is not diverse or not urban enough. Another common myth is that these candidates will not accept jobs at the institutions, and that if they do, they'll leave for a more desirable position as soon as they make tenure. Finally, still others believe that a strategic effort to recruit more faculty of color perpetuates reverse discrimination, undermine efforts to hire the best candidate for the job. This leads right into the next underlying challenge, which is the perception that faculty diversity is incompatible with academic excellence. A common excuse for not hiring candidates from underrepresented populations is that they are less qualified, and therefore hiring them would lower a department's standards and expectations. In order for an institution to be our approach to be successful at the institution, the stakeholders need to buy into it. They need to believe that the approach being taken is viable and will be effective in both the short and long term. To start off, stakeholders need to recognize the importance and value of diverse faculty and staff. They need to understand how a decrease in diverse faculty and staff could create increased barriers for students from underrepresented minority groups. Some of the more serious examples of these barriers could be lower enrollment, lower academic success, and decreased sense of belonging for students from underrepresented minority groups. To begin the search process, it's important for the search committee to have a clear and stated commitment to diversity. While the agreement between the Wisconsin State Legislature and UW system could impact some of the specific language used in the hiring process, it's crucial for both the committee members and the candidates that they are interviewing to know that they are fully committed to advocating for holistic DEI during the hiring process and beyond. The committee can help to show this commitment through the representation of its members. Having multiple committee members from marginalized communities helps to show that the search process is truly committed toward advocating for DEI. Along with this, training search committee members is also important. The institution should provide the committee with training and development on topics that will better prepare them to conduct the search, including implicit bias, racial microaggressions, inclusive job calls, and debunking myths about various underrepresented communities, including myths about Latinx, Black, Asian American, and Native American candidates. Committees also should be prepared to host campus visits by candidates in a manner that recognizes the candidates are interviewing the campus as much as the campus is interviewing the candidates. While hiring diverse faculty is crucial, retaining them is just important. Once faculty and staff are hired, it's important that the institution is supporting them in the onboarding process. New faculty and staff could be coming from across the country or even across the world. They will likely not know where places are on campus, so it's important to show them around and help them find specific places they need to access. It's also important to help support new hires in the relocation process. This is often a very stressful process, so connecting them with community and other resources will go a long ways towards helping them. If they are struggling to find affordable and accessible housing, some sort of effort should be made on the part of the institution to explore the possibility of either of temporary on-campus housing. While the institution may not have the means or resources to provide this on a temporary basis, effort on the part of the institution can still go a long ways towards showing new hires that the institution is committed to supporting them. Establishing a manageable work burden for new hires is also important. New hires should feel like they have the time and energy they need to devote to their work tasks, so it's also not feeling like they need to meet unrealistic work expectations. So along with this, giving them time to settle in is crucial, and then also being flexible with leave and time off so that new hires have time to get settled in and visit relatives and others as needed. Most importantly, it's crucial to create a sense of belonging for new hires. Creating a welcoming work environment where the coworkers are friendly and welcome them and include them is crucial. And then also including them in events outside of work, such as social activities, social events that may happen at the institution but might not be work focused, but then also events, concerts, sports games, things like that in the community. All those things can really help to show new hires, especially hires that are coming from underrepresented communities, that the institution is truly committed to supporting them and wants them at their institution.
Okay, so we all know everything you have in an administrative proposal or suggestion, it doesn't just it doesn't always go super smoothly, right? Or is accepted, across the board. So what are some challenges that could be faced by leadership that want to apply our approach? So it's important to recognize that higher education is, at first and foremost, a business. A business that serves students, but a business nonetheless. And so I want to talk a little bit about political pressures and the economic impacts that those pressures can have. So in the fiscal year of 2022, so this was 22 to 23, giving to U.S. higher education institutions was at 58 billion. And again, just emphasizing what fiscal year this is a part of. That is a huge number. And then I did some further research into what are the correlations between why folks and companies are donating those vast amounts to institutions. And I found this really interesting research study that ultimately came to the conclusion that private foundations, just as we would expect them to, donate strategically to universities that share their ideology. Typically, the article goes on to say that typically this is in hopes of putting their money to research that the institution is going to do, but it can also just be to support people they feel have the same mindset as them, right, so to speak, within the institution. And so this is really important. The UW system put this legislation in place, and ultimately it is a political issue. Unfortunately, DEI and inclusive practices are seen as politically related. They're often related to the state of our country and the political environment, is becoming painfully clear this very day. And so that's really important to acknowledge that if institutions want to try to maybe navigate this issue a little differently, like we've suggested, with still putting that emphasis on creating inclusive practices, that could have negative political impacts, or people could see it negative politically in other corporations, and that could have a negative economic impact if they decide to pull their donations, decrease their donations, maybe tell other companies or foundations of the like to pull their donations, and that could be really impactful for an institution that may heavily rely on donations. It's different from the private institutions, right? It's not mostly donations. Public institutions get federal funding, but a good portion of funding is still from donations and private donors. The next thing Zach touched on earlier, how important getting buy-in from other faculty and staff really is to get our proposal across. And my hope would be, by implementing these ideas that I have, would be to decrease pushback from folks. Change is not always widely accepted, and that is okay. It really is. But so an anticipated challenge I could see happening is pushback from others that maybe have older faculty that are not very welcoming to change. Maybe you have folks who politically don't align with the university, and so personally they're not feeling super excited to put in place these more practices to hopefully become a more inclusive faculty and staff body. So, and ultimately, it's important to recognize that to put in place all the things that we have mentioned, it's going to take resources, and resources from different departments on campus. So we're providing this proposal to upper administration, but who's actually going to execute the boots on the ground work to make these changes? Departments underneath them. So that may require increased effort from human resources for search committee trainings, like Zach had mentioned. Those things take time. They perhaps cost money, and we need people to be willing to, of course we could tell them, right, as administration, this is what you're going to do, but that doesn't always go over super well. So doing our best to get that buy-in so that they're willing to help us with these things. Another resource that could be needed from other folks, perhaps financial, paying for outside companies to conduct continuing education DEI trainings. We have to basically close down entire DEI offices that were responsible for those trainings and continuing education. So now maybe we have to contract out for that. That stuff is expensive. We're going to need to find some room in the budget to pay for these things. Asking staff to perhaps forego or push back some of their personal job responsibilities to create a smoother onboarding process and increase support for new staff. Zach talked about that. That sounds so awesome, right? We're going to provide more support for new staff. Who does that? Their coworkers and their supervisor and the other higher ups in that department. So, for example, if I'm new to a housing department and I really need some help, maybe that means that 2 other housing staff members on my level are going to block off 4 hours that week on their calendars to help me onboard more smoothly. That's time taken away from their job duties that they still need to get that work done, right? But if we create this buy-in, hopefully they're more willing to do these things that will help get our plan across and get it across smoothly. So those are just a couple of challenges that I anticipate seeing if our proposal is put into place. So I do just want to briefly touch on how leadership expression plays a role into our the execution of our proposal. So it's important to recognize that there's no right, wrong, or one-size-fits-all leadership approach. I feel like this is something that we've learned throughout our semester in this course, and kind of learned that like a lot of institutions and a lot of people use multiple leadership styles integrated together in a way. But I did just want to point out one theory or style that I feel like might be best for the execution of our approach, and one that I feel like might not be the best. So the democratic leadership theory includes employees in the process of determining goals and how to execute those goals. The real main point that I feel like is important about this is establishing that buy-in that is so important. I talked about that on the last slide, and Zach talks about it, that buy-in is so important because when a true democratic environment is established, organizational affiliates gain a sense of responsibility, subsequently working beyond their contractual obligations to give back to the organization. So I just made a ton of, presented a few examples of how we might need some folks to go above and beyond temporarily their typical job duties to execute our plan and make it work as seamlessly as possible. And so if they are bought into our concept, likely they'll be more willing to do that, go that extra mile, do those extra tasks, whatever. One that I feel like maybe won't work the best with executing our proposal is the bureaucratic leadership theory. This is going to emphasize structured rules and focusing on maintaining control. It's important to recognize that, like, in this proposal, we're not saying that we're not trying to acknowledge or abide by the rules that were set or agreed to by the UW system with the Wisconsin legislature as far as the anti-DEI policies, but there are perhaps more creative ways that we can use to follow their guidelines and still push our proposal and our goals forward. So I think with bureaucratic and really wanting to maintain those structured rules and things, it's learning the balance between bending and not breaking those rules, and knowing that sometimes their pushback is okay and flexibility is okay, and ultimately if we want to have a goal of supporting staff as the front, have that as the forefront of our minds, that sometimes those rules will need to be bent.
We should also mention challenges that we may see as it relates to theory itself. So looking at organized anarchy and how that would apply to UW-Madison, because there are a multitude of different individual units, it can be even impossible sometimes to consider buy-in and getting buy-in from each individual unit, which could warrant the need for bureaucratic leadership to begin with. It can also be difficult to disseminate information to everyone and guarantee that they all see it and know about it and therefore implement it. And further, not everyone will even agree with the proposed changes, depending on how they want to facilitate change in their own unit. Jumping to bureaucratic challenges, there are some that may not respect top-down authority for different reasons, including believing that those in higher-up positions don't understand what it means to be in their unit or do the work that they do. It could feel less personal. And lastly, that policies and standard operating procedures don't have flexibility for situations that may call for flexibility. And here are our references. Thanks, everyone.